Obviously, today we're talking a ton of Golden State Warriors. If you're just joining us, Andrew Wiggins won't play tonight against the Knicks. We don't know about tomorrow, but Steve Kerr didn't sound optimistic. We don't know how long he's going to be out. Obviously, the same thing, or kind of the same thing, started to happen last year and went 25 games. We don't know how long it's going to go this year. But what we do know is they're not going to play with Andrew Wiggins tonight and maybe for longer. Let's welcome in Jason Timpf. He's the host of Hoops Tonight on the Volume Sports Network. And Jason, we've talked to you a few times over the years, and one of the things you do extremely well is you're very knowledgeable about five-man units and how teams play. What do you anticipate the Warriors are going to do if they have to play without Wiggins for, let's just say, an extended period of time, and kind of what do the numbers show about this team when they have Wiggins, when they don't have Wiggins, and who fills in for him best?
This is such a bummer, the timing of all of this. I remember when I saw the report yesterday, I literally thought it was somebody pulling up like something from last year and like making a joke about it or something. I'm like, wait, we're doing this again? And like, what's crazy is he was playing the best basketball that he had played pretty much since he left the team last year. Mm-hmm. Shooting like 48% from three, giving like some real second side creation, like beating his matchup and, like wing catches when he has a good opportunity to like kind of rip through to the right and try to create offense. He's averaging 1.3 steals over this 14-game span, where the Warriors were 11-3, and like really the entire Warriors season turned around when they went to a lineup that I had kind of been begging for a little while, which is Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond front line. Like the debate about whether or not Klay or Brandon Podziemski could start at the two, to me that wasn't nearly as important as just putting your best three defensive and offensive athletes at the 3, 4, 5. That's literally what turned the Warriors season around. It gave them a better opportunity to compete on the defensive end of the floor, gave them more opportunities to run the floor in transition, because the offensive shot creation beyond Steph has been an issue most of the year. But if you're going to be in a rock fight type of game where Steph has to take and make difficult shots and carry your offense, you want to have at least the athletes on the floor to compete. And now with him out of the lineup, like it's really difficult to come up with things that work. I think you could probably try to maintain the athletic profile by going with a Trace Jackson Davis. I get nervous about the speed of any other lineup that you could throw out there to where you could run into issues just simply in terms of athleticism if you go in another direction. And even the biggest concern to me about it is if he misses a substantial amount of time, he is very much a rhythm player. He's the kind of guy that'll come back and not look like Andrew for a while. And so, yeah, like, he could not have come up with worse timing for something like this, and Steve Kerr is going to be in a bind.
Well, let me ask you this. He started Moses Moody in his place the other night in Washington. We've been batting this around all day. We kind of feel like what if he goes in that direction? Starting Moses Moody like he did the other night. What do you see there?
Moses Moody is the most reasonable facsimile to replace what Andrew Wiggins brings, right? Like he's a good physical point of attack defender, active hands, can kind of get deflections and force turnovers. Better shooter, more reliable shooter than Andrew Wiggins. It's more just the youth and inexperience that always comes into the equation with him. But that's probably your best bet to maintain the exact same level of physicality. The tough part is the offensive shot creation piece, because I don't know if you in the last 7 games or so, teams are really starting to send multiple defenders at Jonathan Kuminga. He had that stretch there where he was scoring the ball really, really well. And over the course of the last 7 games or so, you're seeing teams, especially when he puts the ball on the floor, that late help kind of towards his left-hand side where he can be a little sloppy with the basketball. Teams are starting to send multiple defenders to him. And so Wiggins' shot creation was kind of important there. And so that's not necessarily a strength of a guy like Moses Moody. But again, in a list of flawed options, that's a really good one.
Jason, a lot of good stuff from you there. If you go back to last year's Golden State Warriors, what happened before with Draymond and Poole, the season started, for them to even get to the second round, I told my partner that was a win for me. Now, when you look in totality this season up until this Andrew Wiggins news broke, Jason, how shocked are you, or if you're shocked at all, that the Warriors are sitting at the 10th seed? Because I am.
I did not see them as a team that was going to be a very good regular season team this year. They kind of struck me as a team kind of similar to the Lakers, whose fates kind of came down to the trade deadline. And honestly, I really do think they would have been more aggressive there had it not been for Jonathan Kuminga's rise. And Jonathan Kuminga's rise was meteoric. He had never had consecutive 20-point games in his entire NBA career, and then he did it 7 times in a row. And so, it's always difficult to kind of have perspective in situations like this, because you have Steph Curry, a guy who is definitively a top 10 player in NBA history, who's still playing very close to his peak. And there's a certain element of you want to give him all the tools that he needs to weaponize his superpowers when you get to the postseason. But in the big picture, Jonathan Kuminga and the potential that he has flashed is worth way more than anything you could have gotten back in the trade market in terms of the long-term potential of the franchise. Like I just mentioned, teams throwing doubles. He's actually managed it pretty well. He's averaging 4 assists per game over this stretch. He's not turning the basketball over. It's a 2.5 assist to turnover ratio. He's making some high-level reads. I was watching in the Clippers game in particular, they were throwing late help to him, and he was making good two-hand over-the-top skip passes to the right shooter. He was looking off help defenders. I'm I think Kuminga in a few years is going to be a star. No one can guard him one-on-one. Legitimately, that was how he had those 7 straight 20-point games. Those teams were leaving him on an island to see what he can do. And we found out pretty quickly, oh, wait, nobody in the league can actually guard him one-on-one. He's too fast. He can get defenders. He can get defenders out of position. He can draw free throw. He can get to the free throw line a lot. He has so much potential. And so it's kind of weird in the sense that it caused the Warriors to kind of lean into this existing group, but the long-term potential now is better just because you have another guy that you can point to that's this guy is a hit. We hit on this pick. This can change the fortunes of the franchise in the long run. It's just always going to be a little bit of a kind of a funky kind of in-between zone when you've got a guy like Steph, and now you've got this number 2 who's a really, really young player, and will have some growing pains along the way, right?
Jason Timpf joining us on 95.7 The Game. He's the host of Hoops Tonight on the Volume Sports Network. You brought up Steph Curry the other night after the Denver game. Steve Kerr said he looked tired. Steph was asked about it. He said he feels good. What do your numbers tell you, and what do your eyes tell you about Steph? I guess the last 6 games hasn't been shooting it well, but take a broader view and let us know where you think you're at with him.
So the Nuggets game in particular, the Nuggets defense is configured in a way where they have 2 really good on-ball guys, right? Aaron Gordon and KCP. But most of their other guys are really good help defenders, but struggle on the ball. And I saw a lot of talk coming out of that, is KCP a step stopper, or has Denver figured out how to stop Steph? And really what it is to me is the Warriors' current set of offensive talent is not capable of punishing teams that are really good in help because of the fact that they can't actually attack the weaker links in the defense. So, for instance, in that Nuggets game, every Jonathan Kuminga screen on Steph, they were switching and just putting Aaron Gordon on Steph, another good on-ball defender. Any other screen, whether it was involving Jamal Murray's man or Nikola Jokic's man or Michael Porter Jr.'s man, they were hedging or blitzing. And in that situation, that's the only shots Steph is going to get are the high difficulty ones. And we all know Steph can make the high difficulty ones, but he just happened to have one of those nights where he couldn't make them, and it became an issue. But the bottom line is, Steph's efficiency in an environment like this, where the lineup is more constructed around athleticism and speed and youth, where he has to kind of take on more of the scoring load, those lineups are inherently going to lead to a dip in efficiency. No different than last year in the postseason. Steph was playing some of the best basketball of his career in that season, but because of the way that offensive lineup is configured, he had his least efficient postseason series since 2019. So some of that to me is just kind of baked into the shape of the roster. If they had a team that had that was more offensive skill oriented rather than, length and athleticism oriented, he probably goes up in efficiency, but your defense isn't as good. So to me, like it's like you're 11-3 in your last 14 games, right? Like your major issues have been against the top of the top teams in the league, which again, that's a problem for another day, right? Like it's baby steps for the Warriors. For now, it's getting out of that 9 and 10 seed, right? So that you don't have to be in a predicament where you have to win 2 play-in games, right? So like, worry about the big fish later. You're winning games. This formula is working, which is leaning on your athleticism, leaning on that front court, and Steph just kind of grinding out offense where he can find it. It's like rock fight basketball, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Jay, let's talk about Klay Thompson. He's went to the bench. He's had some success, and no Warrior fan wants to see him in another uniform. But we were having this discussion earlier this week. If he were to, get to the offseason, he can still shoot, Jay. I watch a lot of League Pass, and there's a lot of teams that think they can shoot. Klay went on, can still shoot it. Could you see other teams throwing 30 or 25 milli at him?
I don't know that he'll get some sort of massive offer, just because of the fact that I actually look at Klay as more of a kind of bench type of weapon now anyway. Like, Klay's always been a really good positional defender. He's a guy who's really good at reading where the guy he's guarding is going to go and kind of beating him to spots and absorbing contact. He's not like a ball pressure guy. He's just a really smart on-ball defender that will make your offensive player take tough over-the-top shots. And what we're seeing is, as he's gotten a little bit older and slower, it's a little bit more difficult for him to stay in front of the best perimeter players in the league. It's a little bit more difficult for him against the best perimeter defenders in the league to get free as he's coming over the top of screens. But that's the whole point of moving to the bench, is now you're going against, the lower echelon, perimeter talent in the league where he can still be super, super successful. And to be honest with you guys, I would be upset if I even saw Klay in a different jersey. It wouldn't even look right for me. So I'm kind of hoping that this just works out with them kind of finding a happy middle ground for him to have a good bench role in his twilight years. Because that to me is what makes the most sense. He also has a deep familiarity with Golden State's system, which I think is something that kind of helps Golden State get more out of him than maybe someone else would in the late phase of his career. So I'm not going to completely write it off, but I would be shocked if he got some sort of massive offer, and I'm hoping that the Warriors can work something out with him.
You're listening to Jason Timpf. He's the host of Hoops Tonight on the Volume Sports Network. Let's jump back to Kuminga for a second. He's eligible for an extension at the end of this season. What do you pay him?
I mean, his agent's going to ask for the max, and here's the thing: he deserves it. He just does. To me, Jonathan Kuminga is a tier 1 athlete in the NBA who has demonstrated a lot more offensive skill than you would expect for a young forward at this stage. We talked about the passing earlier. His 3-point shot has struggled a little bit as of late. I think he's about 25% over his last 7 games, but he was red hot before that, which means there's potential there. He just needs to find consistency. But he has been a pretty consistently great mid-range shooter. And when I combine those specific things, like the ability to handle multiple defenders, and 2, the ability to get defenders out of position and get to the foul line, those are 2 things that you don't typically see until players get much later into their careers. The sky is literally the limit for this kid, and you just got to pay him whatever it costs to keep him. And I mean, maybe that's one of those things you approach Klay about, is hey man, we got a bench role for you here, but if we're going to pay Jonathan, we've got to work out a more of a deal on your end. And my guess, Klay is just such a loyal guy. I have a feeling that they'll be able to find something that makes sense there. But to me, you pay Jonathan whatever he costs. He is, if you're talking about prospects under the age of 22, 23 years old, he's pretty damn high on that list.
Jay, we'll get you out of here on this one. I'm random, so I was going to go around the league and get your finals prediction pick, but I'm going to stop at this one. In San Antonio, what have you made of Wembanyama's his rookie season, man? Because I'm watching him and I'm just blown away, but I'm inside the numbers, what is that telling you about Wemby?
Well, he's taking a leap in the later portion of his rookie season, which is highly unusual. Usually it's that second half of the first season in that entire second season where teams get a really good feel for what a player's weaknesses are, and then they kind of can add that to the we just talked about with Kuminga. Like, okay, now teams are always sending late help after he puts the ball on the floor, typically to his left-hand side. Like, that's the kind of stuff that typically causes players to plateau or to experience a little bit of like a sophomore slump, right? And it's just not happening for him because he's actually figuring it out at an even higher level. He's been a little bit sharper with his shot selection. He's actually starting to figure out how to be he's already one of the 2 or 3 best defensive players in the league. Like, it doesn't even make sense. You have this combination of the 8-foot wingspan, which again, just for simple perspective, imagine a player with a 7-foot wingspan, except for any time he swipes at the basketball and gets within 6 inches of it, it's a deflection. Like that's the type of absurd physical tools that we're talking about. And like the bottom line is he's doing all of this with one of the worst collections of ball handlers I've ever seen
Wow.
in the NBA. And I like Devin Vassell. I do, and he's going to be a good player in the long run. But there's been a lot of like, I'm like, what are they doing? So like, there's actually some buzz that the Spurs are going to go after Trae Young, and I'm not necessarily. I'm kind of on the fence about that move, but all I can think about is what this kid's going to look like with like another year of strength and conditioning, and then giving him some real NBA ball handling, because he is just going to be an absolute nightmare. Like, we're talking just a few years away from being a top-tier superstar. That's the type of potential I think he has.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think he's got a chance to be one of the greatest versatile defenders ever if he keeps it up. I mean, he's pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. Hey, Jason, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your expertise on the Golden State Warriors, man.
This is fun, boys. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time.
All right, Jason Timpf, host of Hoops Tonight on the Volume Sports Network.